Hello, everyone. As Felipe mentioned, I live at the St. Martin Deporres Catholic Worker House in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about, voluntary poverty, which is a word of challenge to every Christian, myself included, perhaps myself most of all. And I say that in the context of St. Martin Deporres House is in Allison Hill neighborhood of Harrisburg. It's one of these communities, like Elizabeth has talked about and several others. It's a community that's suffered disinvestment from racist capitalism, and it is suffering. So we're going to talk about voluntary poverty within the context of understanding the pains of involuntary poverty. But there's no better person to start these words of challenge than the Catholic agitator extraordinaire, Peter Maurin, co-founder of the Catholic Worker with Dorothy Day. Peter tells us, St. Francis thought that to choose to be poor is just as good as if one should marry the most beautiful girl in the world. We seem to think that poor people are social nuisances and not the ambassadors of God. We seem to think that Lady Poverty is an ugly girl and not the beautiful girl that St. Francis of Assisi says she is. And because we think so, we refuse to feed the poor with our superfluous goods. So those words of Peter Maurin's came to mind for me a couple of Sundays ago when I introduced myself to a visiting priest at our parish. I said, I'm with the Catholic Worker House right across the street. And he looked me up and down and said, well, you're dressed pretty nice for a Catholic worker. And I'm wearing today what I was wearing then, so you can also judge my commitment to poverty and his fashion sense. We seem to think that Lady Poverty is an ugly girl and not the beautiful girl that St. Francis of Assisi says she is. So often we, like this priest, associate poverty with what is ugly. Beauty is lavish, it requires wealth, it's a luxury, an add-on. And that's for good reason. If we think of the last encounter with poverty we've had, it probably was ugly or difficult or left, a heaviness on our souls. We could see the weight of that imposition on someone's human dignity. And his comment revealed a common discomfort we have with thinking of poverty as beautiful, thinking that poverty can somehow be complementary with our dignity. We are so busy absorbing, healing, processing, ministering to, and mourning over the many crushing indignities of involuntary poverty in this country, we do not often have time or space to contemplate the mystery of voluntary poverty. Servant of God Dorothy Day says, she really captures this tension when she said in Loaves and Fishes, her 1962 autobiography, she says, I abhor poverty and I prescribe it. God did not, Dorothy Day wrote, mean for this life to be so hard. He did not mean it to be so hard for it to be poor. Everybody would be rich if nobody tried to become richer, said Peter Maurin. And nobody would be poor if everybody tried to be poorest. Voluntary poverty is part of the universal call to holiness, articulated by Lumen Gentium, and all Christians are called to this heroic holiness. All are called to the Christian perfection, captured in the evangelical counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. For the laity, of course, these look different than a professed religious order, but nevertheless, we are all called to embrace the mystery of voluntary poverty, no matter our socioeconomic state. Speaking for myself, what we'll find when we begin to embrace this mystery is that the world transforms into enough. Creation is the making of an abundant God, a gift, as Elizabeth said, and we are not called to gain its fruits for ourselves alone, to hoard them, but to give them away abundantly. If this is our focus, we ask ourselves, how can we be sure that there will be enough for us? Poverty is a mystery that Dorothy Day describes as one we must constantly write about and encounter. For if we are not among its victims, she says, its reality fades from us. We must talk about poverty because instead we'll become people insulated by our own comfort and lose sight of it. Voluntary poverty is a path you walk. It's never over. It's never complete. You've never given away enough. We're never poor enough. except for the one, God-man, who emptied himself, deeming equality with God not something to be grasped, and who took on the form of a slave. Within that sacrifice of Christ, the ultimate voluntary poverty, all of our efforts are sanctified and completed. But here, in this practice of Christian life on earth, all of us are constantly battling with what Dorothy Day called the octopus of our grasping self. In our house, we call it alligator arms, the self that desires to hoard all for ourselves, that's stingy with giving out gifts, that says there's not enough. So here are small ways that I invite all of you to free yourself of that octopus, ways in which each of us can find the liberty that St. Francis found when he embraced his beautiful lady poverty. The first is to draw close to the poor. Find a place of community where you can meet those who are on the margins. Does your parish or diocese have a soup kitchen? Perhaps there's a local Catholic Worker House? Don't go and volunteer. Just walk in the door and simply sit at a table and talk to people. You may feel embarrassed as those serving the soup look at you with a side eye. You may feel shame for taking and not for giving. You may feel the disdain or pity that we heap on our fellow poor in this country. If your dignity suffers a few dents and scratches, well then blessed are you, for you're suffering in solidarity with Christ in his most distressing disguise of the poor, as Mother Teresa calls him. So take your bowl of soup and definitely go with the body. The disciples were sent out 2 by 2. And just sit at a table. Introduce yourself, get to know people, ask them their names, where they're from, what they do, who their team is, how many children they have. Learn their stories. Tell them yours. As you come to know their stories, you will come in touch with a prophetic reality. And perhaps these prophets you sit among may inspire you to act. The second is perhaps less challenging, or maybe more challenging for some of us, which is just let go of one thing. There are easy things about voluntary poverty. Some are hard. Try giving up a credit card, just one. One of my friends gave up all his credit cards. Living on the money that's available to you rather than on a debt limit is a great challenge and a prophetic witness against the many poor in this country who are burdened by debt that they'll never pay off. One of our often quoted lines in our household is John Chrysostom says that extra coat in your closet belongs to the poor. And that's a great meditation practice when we hear that reports show that the average shopper in the U.S. purchased 53 new garments a year, which is 4 times as many as they purchased just 25 years ago. And 65% of that is discarded in a year. So how we clothe ourselves in an age of fast fashion truly can be a practice of voluntary poverty. Peter Maurin also said, what you give to the poor is what you take with you when you die. God's bank, he says, is giving to the poor. That's the best return on your investment. I know that may sound foolish to a lot of people here. So sometimes when I feel myself with the little alligator arms or the octopus, this is silly, but sometimes I imagine my heavenly home decked out with all the things that I have given away. Often, maybe it was a challenge. I think of those nicest towels in the donation basket that I gave to the neighbor, the pairs of leggings that I've given to someone who I know will just throw them away by tomorrow, a yoga mat, a pillow. My house in heaven has a solid chunk of change in the piggy bank, and even those LL Bean boots that my grandma gave me, which I passed on to a woman who had walked from Venezuela to Chicago. Now, if that exercise sounds a bit juvenile, that's kind of the point. None of this stuff will be with me in heaven, and if that's the case, then why does it matter? Not all of us can hold on to the truth that St. Francis lives so purely within, the blazing love of God that burns away everything until it is our all in all, until it is enough. Another way of thinking about this is an economic transaction. So at our house, perhaps we are God's investment firm. We currently have, I think, around $4,000 under management, and that's given to us by many people in our community, earned with our own wages, donated by parishioners. And their investments, what they're investing in is our neighbor Brenda's baby shower, who's a single mom raising a beautiful daughter with very little support. It's investing in supporting our friend Omar's family, as he was taken away by ICE 2 weeks ago. helping his wife to pay household bills and car payments, those investment goes towards light bills of our neighbors who can't pay their electricity, towards rent, towards work permits for Haitian refugees. So perhaps, if we think about what that return on the investment looks like, we have a heaven where people can work, can access dignified work, can live in justly priced housing, that they're with their families and not suffering in a prison cell two hours away. And if that's what our investment reaps in heaven, perhaps we can reap a similar world here on earth. Thank you.